Good evening, everyone.
Breakthrough Science Society Kerala chapter has organized this program as part of observance of the National Science Day. The topic for today's discussion is Make Knowledge Free for the Development of Science. The speaker is Professor Soumitra Banerjee. He is a professor of the Physical Sciences Department, Indian Institute of Science Education Research, ISER, Kolkata. He is also the General Secretary of Breakthrough Science Society, and he has been for the last several decades actively involved in the development of science movement in the country. In the recent past, we are seeing that a lot of attacks from different quarters, and one aspect is commercialization of science, commercialization of science publications. Particularly recently, we have seen there are cases against SkyHub and LibGen, two websites that has been providing free journals, and cases going on in Delhi High Court. Professor Banerjee will discuss various aspects of this issue of commercializing science and science publications, and the adverse impact of these things on in the development of science. Let me welcome Professor Banerjee of Science Society Kerala chapter. I also welcome all of you to this webinar. Over to Professor Banerjee.
Thank you, George. I also thank the Kerala chapter of Breakthrough Science Society for organizing the discussion on this very important topic, which normally does not feature among the usual run of webinars that are happening now. But it is a very important subject, very important issue that all people who are connected in some way or other with science should be worried about. In order to understand what the issue is, let us first understand how science works, how science functions. Basically, we scientists who are uh, engaged in the act of doing science, we try to find the secrets of nature, how nature functions. And in trying to find it, we cannot find it in one shot. Our predecessors have made some progress. They have made some hypotheses. Somebody has tested some hypotheses. Some are yet to be tested. So when we start to work on a particular topic, we find ourselves in that kind of a situation. And one cannot do the work without knowing what is already known. Therefore, it is of vital importance to the enterprise of science that everybody involved in the act of doing science should have complete access to the information as to what is already known. If somebody has already found something, then somebody else should not again try to find it afresh, because then the situation in which that can be found is known. This is one elementary thing that is necessary in order for science to function. And the way it functions is that whenever we find something, either a theoretical development, we formulate a theorem, a formula, or whatever, or somebody does a test of some theorem or a formula and ultimately either proves it to be true or false, whatever it is, ultimately that, how would we make it known to the rest of the world? There are two avenues of doing that. A, we publish in research journals, and B, we present in conferences. Out of that, the second is a relatively secondary means of dissemination of knowledge, because only those who attended that conference would come to know about it. We go to conferences mainly for exchange of ideas, to talk to people, start collaborations, but mainly the way of dissemination of knowledge is to publish in research journals. And when we want to publish in a research journal, we write up the paper and then submit it to that research journal. The editor or the associate editor, there are normally a group of associate editors, they would send the paper to a few people who are knowledgeable in the field. They will read the paper and give a verdict whether that is publishable or not, or they will request some changes, some additional data to be put in, some additional experiment to be done, whatever, but they will give their feedback. And on that basis, after the paper is revised and finally found publishable, then only it is published. It is a process called the review process. Now, when we do the research, then it is a research itself is an expensive process, because we need equipment for that, instruments for that, consumables for that, and that normally comes from the taxpayers' money. So we spend taxpayers' money in order to advance science, and finally the result of whatever we do goes into the journals for publication. And when these are published, it is supposed to be available to the rest of the humanity. It used to be working like that. At least it started by working like that. Scientific publishing actually started soon after the Renaissance. After the founding of the Royal Societies, the first thing that the Royal Societies did was to start such publications, scientific journals. Initially, these were communications between scientists that were published, and finally they took shape of formal papers. For example, the Royal Societies, Royal Society of England, its journal started functioning in 1665. There is a very important journal published from Germany, the Annalen der Physik, that started functioning in 1790. This is the journal in which Einstein published all his 5 papers in 1905. Similarly, there is a Annalen der Chemie, chemistry journal. So these were published around the same time, around 1790 they started. Then the journals that we now hear of, like Nature, Science, Physical Review, they started, Nature started in 1869, Science started in 1880, Physical Review started in 1893. So these were actually journals that were controlled by scientists or societies of scientists, either the Royal Society, or in case of Science, that American journal, it is the American Association for Advancement of Science, which published this journal, Science. So these were for the scientists, managed by the scientists, and published by the scientists. But this situation continued like that for a long time. For example, in the early part of the 20th century, when major developments in, say, genetics and quantum mechanics and particle physics were happening, all the papers were published in journals that were freely available to everybody. And so we see a relatively fast development of science, and even people sitting in remote areas could also take part equally well in the scientific pursuit. Let me give an example. In 2017 or so, exactly the year I'm forgetting, 2 very young, fresh pass outs from the master's course, their name was Satyendranath Bose and Meghnad Saha. They were recruited by the then Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University to start a new program of master's degree in physics. But these 2 people were not physics graduates. They were graduates of applied mathematics. And there was no physics masters at that time, so he wanted to start a physics master. So these two people had the task of learning physics, teaching physics, and then how would they learn? Every week there would be a ship coming into the dock which brought in the journals of that time, and they would go to the dock, collect the journals, and they would read the journals. So that way they were one of the first people to read Einstein's paper on general relativity. So that paper was published they translated it from German to English, and they were the first people in the world to translate that paper into English. And it was published by the Calcutta University. See, people sitting at the other corner of the globe, completely deprived of every facility, but they had the facility of getting access to knowledge. Because whatever knowledge was available at that time was available to everybody. Now, that situation began to change as various economic crises were, the First World War was due to an economic crisis, the Second World War was due to an economic crisis, and since then it has been, perpetual cycles of economic crisis. Some industries sinking, some industries sometimes flourishing and then again sinking. That was the situation. So it was rather difficult to find an avenue in which an investment has guaranteed return. In that situation, a few people saw science as a money-making pursuit. How did it start? It is said that it started with a person called Robert Maxwell. He was in England, and he bought one practically defunct, sinking publishing house called Butterworth. You may have heard of this name, Butterworth Publication. He bought it, and then from there, after some time, it took the shape of what is known as the Pergamon Press. What he did was, he visited scientific conferences and talked to scientists, and quickly realized that science can be turned into a money-making business, which nobody thought at that time. It was free. And what he did was, he started a few journals, and he somehow talked to people, talked to scientists, invited them to great places, to islands in which they would be planning to start a new journal. And so scientists were not used to getting this kind of monetary or physical benefits. So they were charmed by this man. And they agreed to the idea of starting new journals. So he started a few new journals with very important scientists like Nobel laureates on the editorial board. So that would get the fact that these people are so well known would give weight to those journals, and people would like to submit to those journals. But these journals were basically a money-making pursuit. So the way this journal function was, ultimately, in order to buy those journals, subscribe to those journals, you have to pay. So before that, subscription was there. It was not completely free. Subscription was there, but subscription was nominal. But now the subscription fees started increasing with the increase of the prestige of those journals. And you see, scientists often want to publish in the journals. They want to be members of the exclusive club of being able to publish in the exclusive journals. And so by creating such highbrow journals, he created a situation where scientists wanted to publish and wanted to read those papers. And by doing so, he jacked up the prices. Now, here is a catch. If somebody jacks up the price of a soap, you might not buy that soap. If somebody jacks up the price of an umbrella, you might not buy that umbrella. You might buy somebody else's umbrella. But these are the things that are purchased by your own money. So you do exercise judgment, and if you find something relatively cheaper, or you find that worthwhile, you go there to buy it. But in this case, he realized that scientists do not read journals that they themselves buy. They read journals that are subscribed by their institutions, their libraries. And the libraries are not supported by their own money, libraries supported by the government. So these companies started jacking up their prices. And today, the status is that the subscription, if you want to subscribe to any standard journal today, the subscription cost will be something like $4,000. So when I quote something in dollars, multiply by that by 73, so you know more or less the price of a journal per year, one journal. And libraries have to subscribe to hundreds of journals. For some relatively more prestigious journals, this price of subscription today is more than $10,000. And there are a few journals, for example, Elsevier's Biochemica and Biophysica Acta. Its journal subscription cost is $20,930. Imagine your library has to subscribe to that journal for you to get access to that information that is published in that journal. And most libraries would not be able to subscribe to that, especially in the relatively backward or financially weaker countries like India. And within India also, there are those financially relatively stronger institutions and relatively weaker institutions and universities, which cannot subscribe to this. And as a result, the people of these institutions would not have access to the information or the result of research published in these journals. They would not know. How can they do their own research? You might say that it is possible for an individual researcher to buy a particular article. Yes, it is possible. So there is a paywall. You have to pay, and then only you get to read an article, a paper. And for Elsevier, the article charge for one article is $31.50. Multiply that by 70 to figure out how much it is. And for Wiley publications, it is $42. And similarly, all these, top-level publishers, science publishers, Wiley, Springer, Elsevier, these are the elite publishers. They have around $40 range. So in order to read a paper, a single paper, you have to dish out $40. Now, in order for a PhD student to do PhD work, he or she has to read hundreds of papers. Where will that money come from? Simply, we do not have that kind of money. It is not only us. Even in the United States, in Europe, the universities cannot afford to subscribe to all those journals. And so the people do not have access to that. But still, we, the people who do the research, pressurize our libraries to subscribe to journals, because otherwise we do not get to read the proper information. We do. I mean, every year, the librarian says that we have this chunk of money, without which journals you want, you just prescribe. We would say that this actually buys nothing. We need more. But obviously that cannot be purchased. Now, what happens is that these publishers now understand that the faculty members will pick and choose journals, the ones that they regularly read, and leave out the rest. So in order to avoid that, they have developed another publication model in which they only give bundled subscriptions. Which means, for example, Elsevier publishes a 1,000 journals. And if you buy all 1,000, then there's a quantum of price. But if you buy individually, it is very high price. So as a result, many institutions and universities are forced to purchase the bulk subscription of all the journals, and 90% of the journals, nobody in this university will be reading. Because we are normally very selective in reading. Wherever we need to read, we read. So every scientist has a few journals in which the papers of their interest will be published. And naturally, it's not, it doesn't make sense. But the way they sell is that the institutional libraries are forced to buy those. With the result, by the way, I was talking about Robert Maxwell. He then converted Butterworth to Pergamon Press, and after some time, he gave it a big shape. And then one Dutch company, Elsevier, bought Pergamon Press. So it is now, whatever he did, that is now a part of the Elsevier empire. So right now, there is that Elsevier company. There is Springer, which was a German company. Now it's an international multinational company. There's Wiley. And there are a few such relatively smaller ones. But since these are those monopolistic publication houses, the scientists' organizations that were there, I said that it started with Royal Society, the American Association for the Cultivation of Science, for the Advancement of Science, and this such kind of scientists organization, they also have started to follow this business model. So as a result of which, the affair of doing science has been seriously hampered. Try to understand this point, that science can only flourish if I get the information that I need. I get to know what is already known. Without that, I cannot do any science. Nobody in the world can do that science. So if science or the knowledge is not available free, science cannot progress. These companies have therefore impeded the advancement of science by taking complete control over the information that is produced by scientists all over the world. A few companies. Now, what do they do? You might say that, for example, if there is a company like steel plant, then the steel plant converts this ore into iron, iron into steel, and steel into almirahs and other things, rods, and finally that goes out into the market. So the company has done things. It has added value to what it was to give it a shape of what it is. But what do these publishing companies do? Nothing. Because this presently the authors do their work not with the money provided by the publishing company, but with the money provided by the government. So the government provides money to the universities to do their research. And we do the research using the money, taxpayers' money. It's not government's doling out anything. It is people's money we are using in order to do our research, and the output, we ourselves write it up. We ourselves cast it in a particular format. That means the formatting also does not have to be done by the publishing house. We submit it. It goes to the editor who works free of charge. He sends it to the reviewers who do that work free of charge. They get no money for it. And finally, the author again revises the work, gets no money for it, submits it, gets no money for it, but ultimately at that stage has to transfer the copyright to the company, to the publishing house. So the publishing house holds a paper that I own the result of your research. The publishing house, Elsevier, Springer, and companies like that, they hold a paper saying that I hold whatever information you have produced through your life's struggle. And then they sell it. So they buy at no cost and they sell at high cost. How much is the profit then? There was a report published in The Guardian, a British newspaper, by Stephen Burami. A few days back, there was a similar webinar conducted by Breakthrough Science Society in which Professor P. Balaram spoke. He cited this information, so I'm just quoting from him. That report in Guardian said that in 2010, Elsevier's scientific publishing arm reported profits of British pounds 724 million on just over British pounds 22 billion in revenue. That means it was a 36% margin higher than Apple, Google, or Amazon posted that year. So science publishing as an industry that has a profit margin of around 36%, while any other industry, you just scan the globe, you will find that 15 to 20% is the average. But this industry has twice that profit margin. There was another report published in 2011 that said, let me read it, who are the most ruthless capitalists in the Western world? Whose monopolistic practices makes Walmart look like a corner shop and Rupert Murdoch look like a socialist? Rupert Murdoch is owner of a large number of TV channels, publishing houses, newspapers in Australia, in England, in many countries. So he is a media mogul, as they call. Phil the rich. But this report says that in comparison to what these publishing houses are doing, even Rupert Murdoch looks like a socialist. You wouldn't guess the answer in a month of Sundays. While there are plenty of candidates, my votes goes not to the banks, the oil companies, or the health insurers, but wait for it, to the academic publishers. Theirs might sound like a fusty and insignificant sector. It is anything but. Of all corporate scams, the racket they run is most urgently in need of referral to the competition authorities, which means that it is like a racket. It's a scam. That the science, the information that scientists produce is now monopolized by a few handful companies. They own the information. They own the whole of science. This is a scam, and they are making huge amount of money out of it. So there is a model in which scientists submit, they publish, and the publication ultimately, a few years back, they used to publish like printed material. We used to read going to the library, but no longer. Now everything is on the net, and so even the printing service is no longer necessary. Do they need copy editors? Do they need proofreaders? Do they need all those activities are now outsourced to India? Our people do this work at rock bottom prices. So actually their expense is practically zero. But they sell at that kind of prices to the institute libraries. As I said, the average is around $4,000, and there are journals of $10,000 subscription, $20,000 subscription, doing nothing. You might ask, why do the scientists submit to them? Okay, before I go there, let me cover another issue. This is a publication model. A few years back, somebody said that, no, let us change the publication model. This is actually not working. The reader has to pay. It is not good that reader has to pay. So they changed it. They coined a term. It was again the same kind of companies. They coined a term, open access journals. You might think that that's good, open access, everybody can access that. No. In that case, the model is that the reader does not pay, but the writer pays. So the author who has done the work by spending government's money, the people's money, taxpayers' money, will have to pay additional amount to get the paper published. And how much? A paper, in order to publish it, you may have to dish out something like 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs rupees, I'm talking about. Because I had to publish, and therefore I know this amount of money I have to give to them to publish these papers. So they have changed the model. Some journals have changed the model from the reader pays to the author pays. But at the end of the day, who is paying? The taxpayer, the people. People are paying to who? A few companies. And now the scientific publishing also has taken that route. That means the scientific publishing means the scientific organizations. For example, for electrical engineers, there is an organization called IEEE. For physicists, there is the American Physical Society. For chemists, there is the American Chemical Society. And similarly, there are such companies that are big publishers of many journals. In addition to the Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, these are also big publishers. They also have taken the same route. That means they are also publishing in either of these two models. By that, essentially, science has become a commodity. Something that can be something that's the intermediary to make a lot of money. Somebody produces something, you buy and you sell. That way, it is the business model. In this case, you buy at practically no price. You sell at a heavy price, so you make a huge amount of profit. Most importantly, knowledge has become private property. Knowledge has become private property. I own that knowledge. Why? Because the author has transferred the copyright to me. In that sense, the publishing houses own that knowledge. Now, you might ask why the scientists published there in the first place. The reason is that we want our work to be seen by people, by peers, by people working in that field, because that will help them. If I have found something, then I would want the other people working in the same field to read that paper so that they don't have to, if I have made some mistake, they don't have to repeat that mistake. If I found something worthwhile, they can use it. So I would like the peers in my field to read. And the good journals, the well-known journals, are the ones that people read. And these are the journals that are controlled by them. As I said, initially it started by actually bribing some scientists with some physical amenities, but that way they created an atmosphere so that some particular journals made name, and that ultimately made such a aura around those journals that people like to publish there. Nature, Science, Cell, Physical Regulators. These are the journals in which we like to publish, because I know that if I publish there, other people will read. An obscure journal, something that nobody has heard of, nobody will read that. So now we have a situation, because of that reason, we scientists like to publish in journals that are read, and they have monopolized that channel. These companies have monopolized that channel. Now, in this situation, suddenly about 10 years back, a single student from Kazakhstan, she said that I cannot tolerate this. She tried to get access to some journals, some papers that she needed for her own PhD work. She didn't find it. She didn't find it means it was behind paywalls, and she could not pay that. She was from a developing country, Kazakhstan. So she says that in that case, let me take on this behemoth. So she wrote a program by which she created a website called Sci-Hub. She created that website, and she sourced all papers that were available at that time in the public domain. Because, for example, if I publish some papers, my papers other people have to buy. I understand that, but at the same time, I keep that paper in my website. This is a standard practice. We do keep our papers on our website. So these are available also free. So she sourced those papers and kept in one repository. At the same time, those companies, those universities and institutions, libraries that subscribe to those journals, these were available through those libraries. She, by some means, she doesn't disclose how, she also sourced from there. So as a result of which, right now, 90% of all papers published are available through her website. Now, nobody needs to subscribe to those journals any longer. My students, or anybody, not only my students, even students in US, in Europe, in the richer nations, they also subscribe, they also download papers from the journal free. She said that knowledge should be free. Her motto was to make knowledge free. You are stealing the knowledge, and therefore I will steal it back. She gave a talk a few years back in a conference organized in University of Texas at Austin, in US. She gave a talk. And in that talk, she said that if somebody is stealing back from him or her has always been hailed. She gave the example of Robin Hood. Why was Robin Hood a hero? Because Robin Hood would steal from the rich and give to the poor. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Those people have stolen from the scientists something that actually belongs to the people, and I'm stealing it back. So she says that I'm stealing it back and giving it free to the people. Science should be free. Naturally, these companies were alarmed. They started a court case in the US. They won it. And the court case charged Alexandra Elbakyan, that student. Her name is Alexandra Elbakyan. The court charged her some millions in damages. She is not there, so they could not catch her. She is in somewhere, Kazakhstan. But they stopped the website. So since then, you will find that Sci-Hub, that particular website, Sci-Hub dot something, right? For example, if anything is hosted in India, it will be .in. If something is hosted in Taiwan, it is a .tw, and so on and so forth. There has to be a country code at the end. And every month you will find that they dot something that changes. Why? Because she is driven out of one country after another, and she goes to another country and starts it. And somehow she has so far succeeded in keeping the website alive, even in spite of a huge pressure from all interest groups. Now, what has happened now is that in December, 3 of these publishers, Elsevier, Wiley, and American Chemical Society, they started a court case in Delhi High Court demanding or asking the Indian government to ban access of Sci-Hub in India. How can that be done? If the service providers, internet service providers, they do not allow this particular website to be accessed, then that can be done, and that's what they're seeking. If that is done, then Indian science is doomed. I can tell you that practically the whole of Indian science survives on Sci-Hub, because the only source of information, no library in India can subscribe to all the journals that are published. Not even the best journals, not even the important journals. It's not possible. They're so expensive. So everybody gets the papers through Sci-Hub. Now, if that becomes banned in India, then in no time you will find that science is dead. And that is why Indian scientists are also contesting that court case. That means they have become, they have pleaded with the court that it concerns us also. So please hear us out. So that in this particular case, there is a, on the one side, there is Elsevier, Wiley, and American Chemical Society, and the other side there's Elbakyan, and there are scientists who are also want to have their voice heard. And the case was supposed to be heard in December. It was deferred to January. It was deferred to February, and now it is supposed to be heard on 17th of March, which is only. So we do not know what will happen in that court case. Because for a court of law, what often matters is not what is right and what is wrong. What matters is what is legal and what is illegal. And often, what is right is not legal, and what is wrong is legal. In this case, making knowledge a private property is legal because ours is a capitalist system in which anything can be a subject, anything can be a commodity, anything can be bought and sold, even knowledge. And because of that reason, even though we are contesting that case, even though we are pleading that since she is not making money out of it, she is not making any business out of it, she is only making it available, and without that will not survive. We are making that plea, but it's not certain what ultimately will be the outcome of that court case. Unless the people of India, the students of India, the academic people of India, the teachers, professors, they all tell in unison that no, science cannot be a private property. Science has to be free. And we support Elbakyan's effort to make science free. And even if, see, she is under enormous pressure from all the powerful powers of the globe. Americans, West Europeans, all those the powerful countries, NATO countries, they are all baying for her blood. We never know. We don't know how long she will be able to withstand that pressure. We don't know. But at least we should stand by her. We should stand by her. And I would also plead with everybody to consider to create an alternative publication model, free publication model, where we will be able to publish free, we'll be able to read free. We need to go to that kind of a model. Otherwise, science is facing a real challenge. Science is likely to face a real crisis. This crisis is created by profit motive. This crisis is a typical crisis that happens where production and consumption happens only through profit motive. Normally, toothpaste is produced with a profit motive. Somebody who produces it expects some profit to be made. But knowledge also now is becoming a commodity from which enormous profit can be made. And they're making it. And I would request everybody to protest against science becoming a private property, to demand that science should be free. Without that, the future of science is bleak. I'll end here, and if there is any question, then I'll answer later. I'll now hand over to the organizers. If there are questions, then I can answer.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Soumitra Banerjee, for the wonderful session. I see a few questions. this should become an international movement to free science knowledge from monopoly power. How can we organize internationally? That is the question.
Oh, well, it is a difficult pursuit. As you see, that the entire knowledge sector has been monopolized, has been privatized by a few companies, and it is difficult because we can start a publication model which is free, but why should scientists submit there? They also want to be recognized, and you get recognition only if you can publish in those coveted journals. Huh? So that is therefore there are difficulties. But my own take is that we have to do it. Without that, it is forever going to remain a private property. We have to break the jinx. And for that, I appeal to the younger generation who are now on the way to becoming scientists to consider that we will not publish this way, we will publish in a free way.
Okay.
The question is from Mr. Muralidharan. Is anything being done formally to represent the interests of scientific community at the Delhi court? Are the scientific academies involved?
Well, individual scientists, a group of 14 scientists, have filed what is known as a what's called, intervention. That means they want their voice to be heard, and that includes some of the ex-presidents of the science academies. But science academies per se are not involved in this. But yes, scientific community is being represented by them in that court case. Any other question?
Yes. The question is from Mr. Anandu Jain. What if the scientists themselves from an online platform where they can peer review and publish papers from researchers entirely free? A collaboration of major institute by forming an editorial board of eminent scientists could make this happen. It seems hard, but with proper publicity, within a few years, it might succeed.
Actually, that's exactly what my own proposal is. And I have sent this proposal to all the science academies of India on a personal capacity, because I am a member of those science academies. So in that capacity, I have sent it to the presidents of all the science academies. But I must admit that so far, apart from the Indian Academy of Science, Bangalore, from his president, I have got a response, a positive response, but from the others, I have not yet got. Maybe they're considering, they will give the response later. But my understanding is that if such a effort has to happen, it has to happen by individual, well-meaning young scientists rather than a body of scientists like the academy. The academies are, it would have been better if these are done by academies, but you see the academies run their own journals, and these journals are now taken over by Springer. All these academies have journals, and these journals are actually published by Springer. So since there is a handshaking between the academies and Springer, it's difficult for the academies to break that MOU and come out of the. So there are practical limitations by which I would gather that they might not be able to respond favorably to this idea. So it has to be done by a few individuals. But that's exactly what my own proposal is.
Okay. I request Advocate Sajeev T. Prabhakaran to put his question. He wants to directly ask Soumitra.
Yeah, I am from Kerala. I'm an advocate in High Court of Kerala.
Yes.
I'm eagerly watching this issue actually in Delhi High Court. I am basically an MSc Physics, and I done my some work in Indian Institute of Astrophysics. After that only I done some lot of job. Then now I am the criminal lawyer in Kerala High Court. Okay, so I know the scientific community how it works. At that time also, I took my MSc from Kochi University. At that time, even now also, the premium institute says that you must have this publication in this type of journals. They are insisting as an eligibility. Then we.
Your voice is broken.
Hello? Hello?
I could not hear you for the last 3 seconds.
Yeah, it's regarding the journal clause 1. Okay.
Yeah.
That it is an online journal only. They can't do anything. As per you already said it. It is our publications is given for $1,000 like that by the authors. Okay. So this is the real cause of this issue is our scientists itself. We must address them first. Okay, without their consent, these publications, publicators can do anything. Why we are giving this type of publication with our money?
The reason is that for a scientist, there is no other avenue available. There are two issues here. One is that there is no other avenue available. As I said, that I would like the result of my research to be known to people. And so I would not like to submit it to an obscure journal that nobody reads.
That's our weakness, sir.
The journal, yes. The journals that people read, these are controlled by them. That's point number 1.
Yes, sir.
Point number 2 is, unfortunately, the where you publish, where you are able to publish, where you are able to cross the reviewer's hurdle, that becomes a very important issue in various things in our scientific life. For example, promotions. For example, getting a job. For example, getting an award. And for this, what they look at is that where you are published. You are published in Nature, that's very good. But if you have published the quality of the paper, they will immediately assume that the quality of paper was not that high. So because of this, people want to publish in relatively well-known journals.
Sir, actually,
are controlled by them.
Sir, actually, one remedy is for this one. What I am thinking in that way, one remedy is that if our government is insisting to their institutions through UGC or CSIR like that, they can issue a notification like that. Whenever any publication comes, first they must keep one copy in this one. Rest they can keep. Our government can do easily. Why we are intervening to these cases, and a lot of time with respect to copyright, it is, I am not thinking a positive, it is positive to our scientific community, I'm sure, because I am dealing this type of cases. Okay.
Your good suggestion.
Yes, sir.
But this suggestion has come already. And
then why it is not implemented, sir?
Wait. This suggestion has come already through the academies of science. This suggestion has come, and it is also being considered as a part of the new science and innovation policy. But that it has a limitation also. The limitation is that by that, when I submit a paper to Elsevier, I will also submit a paper to some repository in India, from which anybody will be able to download. That's the idea. But that can be only applied to papers written by Indian scientists. If I want to read a paper written by some American scientists, I will not be able to get that. So the reach of that idea is relatively smaller. The second issue is that still it does not break the jinx of these monopolistic publication houses, because at the end of the day, people will still submit to those journals. And therefore, there is a transfer of money from the people's pocket to those monopolistic international publishers. That jinx is not broken by this idea. So the idea is good. At least it is a step in the positive direction, because at least some papers will be freely available. but that does not make it entirely available, because any paper that is published outside India is not available to us that way. And secondly, it does not break the monopolistic grip on knowledge. That can be broken if the earlier idea that some listener gave, which I said that that's also my proposal, if that is successful and a majority of scientists submit there in a free platform, then the grip of the monopolistic publishers can be broken.
Thank you, Advocate Sajeev T. Prabhakaran.
Thank you, sir.
Nice intervention. I have here a very young attorney from the United Kingdom, Ms. Shivaranjani Thambi from UK. So she wants to, she gives a suggestion. Please share the intervention on Twitter so that we can amplify it internationally. We need allies in the open access movement as well as those fighting over reach of copyright. Thank you, madam. Thank you for your interest.
Yeah, it should be done.
Yes. Another question from Mr. Joe Jacob. You mentioned that what is wrong may be legal. So how can we surmount this precarious condition?
Well, this is not only true for science. This is true for many areas in the society. And in order to change that, a complete social change would be necessary. The fact that the people who actually do the work are the poorest, and the fact that those who do not work are the richest is unhealthy, but it's legal. So in order to change that, it is basically the production being driven by profit motive that needs to be changed, and that you understand that requires a drastic and fundamental change in the structure of the society. Within this structure of the society, which is known as the capitalist society, all you can do is to demand, and you force the governments to adopt principles that are pro-people. You can try that.
Okay, sir. And he also wants to know the role of government taking in the court.
Oh, government is doing nothing.
No, what stand the government has taken?
The government is doing nothing in the sense that government is not taking any stand. It is left to the court. Whatever the court decides, the government will implement that. It's
Okay.
like that.
And Dr. Babu is asking, this issue is not at all perceived by non-researchers and the scholars of non-scientific disciplines, not to speak of common people. What can be done?
Yes, it has to be taken to the common people. I understand that common people do not read papers, research papers, and the problem is not a real problem in their lives. But if we can explain the problem to them, they would understand. At least the educated lot will understand. And to my experience, yes, maybe the layman on the streets may not, but the educated people who are not directly involved in doing research, they would understand what the problem is. They do. So that is one thing that we need to take the issue to the public. That's our job. We have to do that. But at the same time, this has some similarity of the problems they are facing in their lives. And we need to, place the similarity in question. What they need, they are not getting. What the scientists need, scientists are not getting. It is a problem of the social structure. So effectively, the problem is our social structure, and that has to be made clear.
Okay, sir. Mr. Bapa Ghosh, he wants to know why Indian Chemical Society and other societies are not functioning. The cost of publication is now only maintaining a server. Breakthrough can play a great role in founding a society to publish in a sustainable platform. Again, the situation is not the solution, although we protest to keep it. I would like to hear from Professor Soumitra.
Yes, Indian Chemical Society, Indian Physical Society, and Indian Science Academies, they all have their own journals. But these journals are not very well-known journals. These are not, what is known as high impact factor journals. Indian scientists normally try to publish in relatively high impact factor journals. And at the same time, it's also true that in recent years, over the last 10 years or so, most of the journals published by the Indian scientific societies have been taken over by these publishers, saying that we'll give a more professional service. And in that plea, most of the journals have been taken over by this, mostly by Springer. So they have taken over these journals. So even though these are published, these are managed by the Indian Chemical Society or Indian Academy of Sciences. These are managed, but ultimately the publication is in the hands of Springer, in the sense that the copyright is owned by Springer.
Okay, sir. And Mr. Muralidharan suggests part of the problem of scientists resorting to publishing in high impact journals is unreasonable weightage given to such activity for promotions.
Yes, very right.
Yes.
This is very right. Over the last, I would say, 15 years or so, there is a huge emphasis on what is known as impact factor. And impact factor is a number that is computed on the basis of the number of papers that have cited your paper. That counts the impact of a paper. And number of papers that have been published in a particular journal, their impact factor put together gives the impact factor of the journal. And nowadays, earlier when we were young, our impact or how much productive are we scientifically, that were judged by the senior people in terms of the papers that we wrote. They read it and they figured out whether it's worth something. But nowadays, these processes of, say, promotion, of recruitment, of giving awards, and all these are based on just numbers. And it's a very what should I say, it has taken us 100 years back, because now nobody reads the real worth of a paper. One really just sees that, okay, this has been published in that journal, it's good. Even though in a good journal, a bad paper may be published. That's still possible. So point is that now things have come to the numbers. Now, if somebody like, say, Satyendranath Bose or Meghnad Saha were at this time, they would not be able to produce what they did. A C.V. Raman would not be able to get a Nobel Prize if he were born at this time. Why? Because he would be pushing after numbers, not after a paper that would win the Nobel Prize. So this has resulted in mediocrity. Mediocre science being done just to increase the total number, because that is what is counted for recruitment, for promotion, for awards and everything. So this is a very wrong thing that is happening in Indian science, not only Indian science, worldwide. And as a result, science is as a whole becoming very mediocre science. You are right.
Okay, there is one suggestion from Mr. Pankaj Sharma. We should make a signature campaign from college, each college, institution and university, and send it to the Honorable High Court. It's a very nice suggestion, surely.
Yeah, good
suggestion. So I think Mr. Pankaj Sharma will take up this along with us. One more, why not each university or institute make their own journals which are of international reputes? I think it should be compulsory for each university across our country, and we should force the government to make such platform in each university.
No, if universities start their journals, nobody will submit papers to their journals.
To their journals,
So a reputation of a journal is built over years. Simply by starting a journal, you cannot really get papers from other people other than the people of that particular university. So
Okay.
a reputation will be built only when it has existed for a long time and it has published good papers.
Okay. Mr. Bappa Ghosh is asking why the scientists in India are not uniting to provide the drastic change. A sustainable platform can be developed as an example in India. Why people here are reluctant to come forward. He is from Aisar, Thiruvananthapuram.
Not yet reluctant. I would say that it's a difficult question. See, after all, Indian scientists are humans. They have their own weaknesses. And one weakness is they lust for name, fame, promotions. And because of that, they run after those, high value publications. And if you can publish in Nature, you get your name, fame. So they run after that. And in that process, they spend, lakhs in publishing a paper. You are right. This happens because as Professor Balaram in his talk said that it is basically the greed of not only the publishers but also the scientists. And yes, I am looking forward to seeing the younger generation of scientists coming out of that greed mental complex. Only then we can break the stranglehold of these monopolistic publishers on science. They are actually feeding on our greed.
Okay, there is one more comment from Mr. Joe Jacob. The situation warrants the formation of a consortium of scientists from all fields of science, as discussed earlier. Very true?
Very true. That's true. That is true, but difficult pursuit.
Yeah.
Difficult pursuit, yes. That's true. It's really necessary, yes.
I think some participants have raised their hand. One is Professor Bappa Ghosh. Can you please unmute and speak?
Yes. Yes. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Professor Soumitra. I think my questions are taken two times. Yeah. Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for answering that. So regarding this protest to make this Sci-Hub, work again, I have a thought on this. I mean, Sci-Hub is sort of okay. So I remember one debate which was arranged like 1 or 2 years back when I was doing my PhD at Aisar, Pune, and at that time they took this topic that whether Sci-Hub is a boon or bane to the science. And during that discussion, it came up that people agreed that Sci-Hub is not the solution. So if we go for making it a legal thing or protest for its survival in India, this thing is certainly not going to work, because this is just hitting against some existing laws. And I think we need to change the laws, or maybe we have to adopt another path. I would like to have your thought on this process.
Yes,
because I think the whole process of protesting against the ACS or this case and getting the signature is sort of going to be futile.
No, the signature campaign has already happened, and more than 14,000 people, students, research scholars, scientists have signed, and they have expressed their opinion that in order for us to do science, the access to Sci-Hub is necessary. But that's not the end of the story. See, even though Sci-Hub functions, the fact remains that the bulk of the output of scientists, something that is public property, has actually become private property. What Sci-Hub has done is actually stealing that private property, again giving to the public. True. But this, stealing model, that may or may not work for a long time. So that is not a permanent solution. That is only a temporary solution. If that is banned now, we will really run into trouble. But the permanent solution is to create an alternative publication model that is run by the scientists for the scientists and free of cost. That is the ultimate solution that we have to ultimately adopt. But it's a difficult pursuit to create a new publication model, very difficult. We have to do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you, Mr. Bappa Ghosh. And I think we are coming to the end of the session. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Soumitra Banerjee, Professor. He's the General Secretary of Breakthrough Science Society, working at the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, ISER, Kolkata, in the Department of Physical Science. He has been in this Breakthrough Science Society for the past so many decades. And the very interesting motto of this organization is Science for Man, Science for Society, and Science in Thinking. The most important is science in thinking, which we must develop. And I thank, on behalf of the Breakthrough Science Society Kerala, to Dr. Soumitra Banerjee. Thank you very much, Dr. Soumitra Banerjee. Thank you. And with that, this session is ending. Thank you very much, all the participants who have put up your questions and for interacted. Thanks a lot.